What's up, everybody? TJ here. Real quick before we get started with the episode, I'm testing out a new feature called Fan Mail, which is where you can actually text me from the episode that you're listening to. So as you're listening to this, go over to the episode description, and right there at the beginning, you're going to see some text that says, send me a text message. Go ahead, click that. Let me know what you think about the podcast so far. Let me know of any questions, concerns, anything you might have. I love to hear from you. So go ahead, hit that up. I'm excited to read your text, and let's get started with the episode.
I refuse to surrender the initiative. I take the initiative, right? I'm going to find a way, or I'm going to make one.
Welcome to the Keep the Promise podcast, where we help build resilient and well-rounded firefighters.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Keep the Promise podcast. I am your host, TJ. Today, I don't even know where to start describing this guy. We go way back. He and I took a bunch of our special operations classes together, and that led to an awesome friendship. He's been a sounding board, he's been a mentor, and I've watched him grow from a wee bee firefighter like I used to be to now a full-fledged captain running a special operations team countywide. So it's pretty awesome, and we're going to pick his brain about that today. The talented, the awesome, Bob McCaa. Bob, how are you?
Thank you. That's fantastic. What an introduction.
I've been
I'm
practicing.
humbled. I'm humbled.
Happy to have you on the podcast.
I'm happy
so
to
glad
be
you
here,
agreed.
man. I'm super proud of what you're doing. I really support it, and I'm excited. I'm excited to contribute.
Thank you. Yeah, you remember, God, I approached you with this idea a while back. Mm-hmm. It was you were one of the first ones that I was like, dude, I have this half-cocked idea back when you were getting bounced around all the firehouses as the special ops float captain.
Right. The position was ready, but the firehouse was still under construction, so I had the honor of being the only detail captain in the entire department, just kind of floating around wherever they needed. But no, it's kind of neat, too, because when you started to describe it, the first thing that hit me was like, there's really nothing out there right now that is exactly like what you're describing. You know, like the quantity of training that's available now. The majority of the training I say that's available through institutions like, you know, the Maryland Fire Rescue Institute, like it's all initial certification training, but it doesn't spend a lot of time teaching the tradesmanship, teaching the techniques. So then the entire market's been saturated and flooded with these companies that are going to teach you how to force a door more efficiently, or, you know, purchase their 24-inch left-handed titanium Halligan bar or whatever. And then the reality is, like, so much of this has very little to do with the tool and everything to do with the person, and like, how can we make these better people? Because the better people, you know, if I have a talented chef, they can make something out of nothing. You give them poor tools, you know what I mean? Like, I joke with my firefighters all the time about, you know, hey, a poor craftsman blames his tools. You know, like, it's not the tools' fault. It's not the tools' fault. Yeah, I can get this brand new, you know, $30,000 tool set, but if you don't know how to use it, you know, meanwhile, we got people making something out of nothing. I would much rather put all my energy into the people, because the people are going to make the difference.
And you're starting off strong, because that's exactly what I want to focus on. We're going to talk about your stint at training, and we're going to talk about how you have empowered your people and basically molded them to this like well-oiled machine, this awesome team that I have witnessed firsthand, because so many times that I visit you and I see you guys doing all sorts of crazy cool stuff. Before we dive into it, let's rewind to your humble beginnings.
Okay.
Tell me about how you got involved in the fire service and kind of what led you down this path.
So, I am Robert Raymond McCaa. My dad is Robert Terrence, granddad Robert Francis, Robert Bruce, Robert Dunn, okay, back for almost 200 years. And they've all been firefighters. Growing up, I was not discouraged, but not guided down this path. In a lot of ways, I think there was the hope, you know, that this generation can have a better kind of concept. So this was Dad's thing. My dad was a resident instructor at the Pennsylvania State Fire Academy for 35 years. He was a member of Pennsylvania Task Force 1, the Urban Search and Rescue Team, literally from its inception, like helped build the team, right? Deployments in for a lot of floodwater stuff for Clinton administration. He had some interesting anecdotes about, interactions with President Clinton, and then deployment to the World Trade Center. I went to school. I'm from a rural central Pennsylvania community, originally from this place called Gallitzin, was a coal mining town, and we relocated to Lewistown, Pennsylvania, which is where the State Fire Academy was. I grew up there, went to school, graduated as a young man, had no idea what I wanted to do, but basically was guided like, do something, make money, and, then you can have a hobby or something else, right? Got a degree in computer information systems. I was a network administrator. At age 20, I got hired by a K-12 school district in rural central Pennsylvania and worked there for a bunch of years. And basically in a short period of time, I had a bunch of stuff happen. I'll call him, best friend, Tommy Peters, died of cancer in 2004. Christmas Eve 2004, Tommy died after a long battle with cancer. And then about a year later, December 17th, 2005, my mother passed away suddenly and unexpectedly as a result of complications after a surgical procedure. And then a year later to the day, December 17th, 2006, my mentor in the IT field, a guy named Mike Cox, committed suicide. And it was kind of a wake-up call for me. Like, I joke with my wife about it being my quarter-life crisis. I'm 25 years old. I'm facing all this loss. I'm being exposed to, the frailty of life. Intermixed in there, my nephew is born. My wife and I get married. Shortly after we're married, my wife has a blood clot, is hospitalized, almost dies. And then we spent about 3 to 6 months for her going from, a wheelchair to a walker to a bad limp to a cane to, so really, finding myself here with Mike's death, staring in myself in the face, like I'm 25 years old. I don't love what I do. Life is short. What do I want to do? So, after my mother had passed away and before Mom had passed away and before we got married, I'd moved back in with my dad to help him out. And I got to take him out to dinner and we were talking about stuff. And he was really excited because the star of a television show was coming to town. There was a career combination EMS service called Fame Ambulance that my mom she was an elementary school educator for, I think, 26 years before she retired. Mom had actually taken a sabbatical and was trying to get trained to be a paramedic and suffered a career-ending injury. She had a knee injury that put her out of paramedic school and then had to return from her sabbatical, so she wasn't able to finish. But Mom had ridden on the ambulance and served with Fame, and Fame is a huge part of our community. So they're having their annual banquet or whatever, and this television star's coming. And my dad wouldn't stop talking about this guy. This dude named Randolph Mantooth is coming to town, right? And he wouldn't stop talking about this guy, Randolph Mantooth. And Randolph Mantooth is, had this TV show called Emergency, and it was all about, the fire department and EMS. And so it's getting close to Father's Day, and I go and get this DVD box set of Emergency, right? Like, happy Father's Day, Dad. And if you get an opportunity someday to meet my dad, I think you'd love him. But he's an interesting individual, right? Like, it's hard to shop for, right? So we get this DVD set and we start watching the show, and we're watching the show and kind of talking about it. And next thing you know, like at dinner, we're talking about strategy and tactics, and we're talking about, and suddenly something that had seemed like I was always aware of and always around and had exposed, like we'd ride our bikes up and watch, them do burns because you could see the smoke in the sky. Mm-hmm. Like you'd ride the bikes up, because we lived on Riverside Drive, ride our bikes up the street and watch them burn, and something I had exposure to my entire life. Suddenly, like there's this new, like, wow, this is a lot more interesting, a lot more complex, a lot more intricate than I thought it was. Like, and I was like, I think might want to give this a try. So at age 25, I joined the volunteer fire department, right? And I start taking training, and suddenly it's like, this just kind of fits. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, and it seems like such a cliche, but it just, suddenly I was excited to be there. I found myself being the student that I always wanted. Like, I didn't have to get, motivated to read about it or motivated to practice or motivated. Like, it was just everything that, all these different things that I had interest in, growing up, whether it was history or the outdoors or working with my hands or, being creative or breaking stuff, right? Like, suddenly it's all these things all wrapped into one, and I can take it anywhere I want. And I start doing this. And, man, after a couple months of doing it, I said to Dad, like, I think I'm going to do this as a job. And his statement was, "You must have fallen and hit your head," and once we got through that, he basically said, like, you should really consider going south, right? Like, it really encouraged me. One of his students, who then became an instructor, was a guy named Matt Tobia, who was a career firefighter in Anne Arundel, and then retired from there as a battalion chief, worked in Loudon for a while. I think he was an assistant chief down there, and now is a chief of department in Virginia, in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Really interesting too, really active with National Fall Firefighters, and I used to be the back page columnist for Fire Rescue Magazine, but just a really, really interesting guy, right? It was like, hey, Matt was from Pennsylvania, goes down south, like, has all this opportunity. They're organized based on kind of counties down there, so a lot more opportunities than you'll find in Pennsylvania, where the two largest departments are Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And at the time I was trying to get on the job, like, they had residency requirements and, and all those things, so I basically, like, if you can imagine, just collecting up a handful of darts, and throwing them at the map on the wall, and I threw my hat in the ring anywhere I could. And I had an awesome opportunity with Frederick. My wife was so supportive. I remember we had like a getaway weekend planned, and all of a sudden I get this notice that Frederick is testing. She changed all the arrangements. We came down here. We spent a weekend down here, and just exposure to the community for us to see, like, what was going on here. And, this is like summer 2007, being like, this is incredible. There's people on the streets. There's businesses that are booming. Like, this place is jumping, and like, this could be really interesting. So, yeah, got hired, got on the job, and then it's just been incredible. Like, there was no best time. Like, every time is the best time to be on the job, be on the fire department, right? Like, I tell that to a lot of the kids that are coming in now, because I feel like there's a narrative that's forced upon us about, like, oh man, the war years are behind us, and like, all the we've finally conquered fire. There will never be a fire again. Everybody used to run fires, and we don't anymore. And the reality is, like, things are changing every day. Population's growing, technology's changing, opportunities are fronting us.
Yeah,
how many battery fires did we run 15 years ago?
Dude, I was just gonna say that,
right?
Like,
yeah. You can't even imagine, like, suddenly there's this emerging technology, and as a result, there's a corresponding emerging hazard that we're not prepared to face. Right. New York City has this crisis right now associated with the fire problem with these batteries.
Every day you wake up and you see that they run another, like, multi-alarm fire.
Yeah. And that's coming. It's coming to us. It's just a matter of time. We got to be ready.
I feel that every single department and every generation that goes through hears, the war years are behind us. Like, we don't go to fires anymore, kid. It's just funny, because I guarantee you my generation is going to be telling the next generation that, and they're going to be saying the next thing.
And it's not unique. It's not unique to the fire service. I mean, like, think about the Great War. It was the war to end all wars.
Right.
Well, now they're not. Yeah.
Now that, like, global war and terror guys are messing with the guys who came after, being like, hey, you missed it. 20 years of war, you missed it.
Right.
You missed all of it.
But isn't it interesting too that the nature of that warfare changes? Like, we have a war. We have a war the last 20 years, but we don't have the equivalent losses. We have technology. We have, you know what I mean? So it's still war. It's still conflict. It looks a little different, but we got to prepare for it, Yeah.
Dude, I didn't realize you were a fellow computer nerd.
No, I feel like that's one of the first things that we kind of clicked on. Like,
I think that's why we
just kind of, like, I have this habit of, I noticed once upon a time, and I remember this during my hiring process, right? Like, everybody's sitting in this room, and kind of like eyeballing each other up as competition. And I'm thinking to myself, like, man, if we get hired, we're all going to be on the same team anyway. Like,
right.
Now's a chance to find out who you are, where you're from. I know we've all got something in common. We're all here for the fire department. So, I was fortunate enough to get onto Howard for, I think it was Swiftwater. I don't know if it was Swiftwater and then Rope or Rope and then Swiftwater.
I think I don't know. We took both of them.
Yes.
And it was back to back. It was like
awesome.
we were crushing those classes.
And we spent so much time together. And but I just remember turning around and we kind of struck up a conversation, like, where are you from? And what did you do? Oh, you're a computer guy. I was a computer guy. You know what I mean? Like, how'd you get in the fire department? And just kind of went from there, man.
Same discussion. Told my dad, and he got really mad.
Yeah, right.
He's like, all these degrees and you're going to be a fireman? I'm like, oh, I don't want to do anything else.
Doesn't that make you a more versatile, right? Like,
I think so.
I feel like part of the reason why, to start to tie it into the training stuff that you're saying is like, I'm viewing this as an adult. Like, I'm an adult student. Mm-hmm. I was a 25-year-old going through and learning this stuff, right? And I break it down to like, okay, like, I understand a lot of this stuff because I've been exposed to it forever. And we did a lot of work on cars and a lot of, construction around the house and, you know what I mean? Like a lot of projects, stuff like that. But then I think about like, oh, I've got, Ricky Recruit sitting next to me that's never done any of this stuff, hasn't seen it, hasn't touched it, doesn't know. All right, well, how can I explain this to him? How can I use transferable knowledge and skill, right? And the same kind of stuff, if you can take those life lessons or, the degree field, right? Like I was just talking with a buddy that worked for the department. I'm like, people are always like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you do this. I'm like, well, it's because I have this background in systems management, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I build a system and then I work a system. It's whether it's on a computer or whether it's with people.
Yep.
I can manage systems because I've got this background in it. You can judge it based on your output whether your system is functional or not, right?
And I think it's a fine line because I go back and forth. Obviously, I come from an education background, right? I spent all those years in college, then went the blue collar route, and we have a tendency to hate on those degree having, micromanaging bean counters, for lack of a better word. And I think it's important to kind of toe that line. Like you said, hey, I can transfer my knowledge of systems from computers to people, understanding that there's inputs, there's a process, there's outputs. How can I tweak these different things without going the route of some of the people that we see, some of the people that we dislike, that they come in, they put their foot down, they say, this is how we do the system thing, this is what works in, academia, this is how the book says we should do it, and obviously there's zero buy-in. Right.
Well, then that has little to do with the degree and little to do with the system and everything to do with the person.
It always boils down to the person.
Comes down to like everything is like you make better people make better firefighters, right? Whether they're well-trained, well-equipped, well-educated, and I have this concept that I've been exploring intellectually for a little while. Like, we place this massive premium on experience, and it's very important. But how can I make it? How do I create it? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, if it's scientific, I should be able to measure it. Well, TJ's got 17 experience points, and I've got 7 experience points. Well, how do I get more experience points? Just going to fires doesn't do it. Because there are people in your department and people in departments across the United States, they've been to 100 fires, and they're still...
It's their
cognitively,
first fire.
Like it's still their first fire, or they go to the fire and based on their ability to manage or mismanage their, emotional, physical, psychological response to it. Like, they've got the SCBA malfunction, or they've got this.
I love those people.
What's incredible, I got to be a part of this awesome leadership experience. Was a battlefield study at Antietam. And they're telling this tale about this general who, the second the shooting starts, he would develop a headache and have to be evacuated from the field. And as they're sharing this, I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my God, this has been going on for 250 years. And they say this, and one of the guys was a guy from Rescue 2, New York City. He's like, does this sound familiar to anybody? Does this sound like, he's like, we got firefighters in our fire department. He's like, this is New York City Fire Department, right. 13,000 firefighters. Like, this is the department in the world, in the United States. Like, and they've got guys that, have SCBA malfunctions and you know what I mean? Like, and then there's a dude from Baltimore City, and he's like, oh yeah, we've got them too. And it's like, oh my gosh.
They're everywhere.
And the reality is, like, the grass isn't greener, it's just more grass. You know, the common denominator is people, whether it's, you know, the Civil War or, you know, different fire departments. Like, people respond to these things. How do we make better people? How do we qualify these things? And in the absence of experience that's administered based on none of the controllables, how can I create experience? How can I make this, right? Like listening to a book on Dwight Eisenhower, you know, Supreme Commander from the Second World War, like the general of generals, later a president of the United States.
The eyes of the world are upon you.
Zero combat experience.
Really?
Zero. None. Right? It's something that he was very aware of and something that he felt very...
You think insecure is the word?
Yeah, I don't know, because it's how does it come out? But realistically, in the absence of experience, this dude with just by the way the stars fell, you know, was in during World War I and in during World War II, and imagine the correlation between that to be like, okay, well, how do we promote our leaders in the organization? It's based off of the job that they're currently doing. This guy might be an awesome linebacker, and I promote the quarterback. He's terrible, right? So here's this guy. Just because this guy was the best soldier doesn't mean the best officer or the best general.
True.
And next thing you know, like, they pick this guy who has all of these gifts, administratively, politically, like a personality, resilience, optimism, all these different things that, you know, these are all important. How do I bottle these and give them to everybody else? Mm-hmm. And then you consider his ability to manage these other dynamic personalities. People talk about some of these other generals that are far more bombastic and combat experienced, you know, and you realize, like, oh, what if we had a whole team of these people? You know, like General Patton is this amazing field leader, does all this incredible bombastic stuff, and he's dynamic. But if we had a whole team of him, probably he has to have a handler. He's got some. He's got an Omar Bradley to keep him. He's got an Omar Bradley because he's got.
So at that point, it's just, I mean, it makes sense, but can you imagine the insecurity of being a 5-star general in charge of an entire invasion of a whole continent?
Sure.
And I think that's when you have to look at your people. This is something that we gripe about a lot in the fire department, that you don't take the feedback. The higher-ups don't take the feedback from the field, from the boots on the ground. And, you know, I'm pretty sure Eisenhower had to do that. He had to trust his folks, have those open lines of communication, be like, this is my team. This is how we're arranging the pieces, and this is our ultimate goal. Dude, I did not know that.
Continuing down that comparison, right, to military history, mm-hmm. The majority of those officers during World War II, their experience was in World War I.
Whole different war at that point.
Totally different, complex operating.
Yep.
Similarly, to go through and say, look, is experience important? Yes, but does experience in one area prepare you for operations in another, right? If you fight in a jungle, is it the same as fighting in the Arctic?
Nope.
Then you start to look at that too. Like, all right, well, I came from rural central Pennsylvania where we did stuff our way. Right? The joke down here is the up homers, right? Up home is how we do it. Up home is the up home, right? So up home, we do it one way, and I come down here. Do I come with experience? Yes. I lived in a Rust Belt community where the newest thing that happened was probably in the early to late 1940s, right? The industrial collapse, the steel mills closed, the rayon, like nothing new is happening. There are no sprinklers. There's no building codes. There's not being enforced, you know.
Right.
We ran 300 alarms a year, but 1 in 10 was a working fire. And when it was a fire, it was multiple addresses, right? They had a fire alarm up there with 17 addresses, terrace, across the river up in the junction. 17 houses, right? Wow. Then what? Like, right. Oh, well, experience. You're right. I don't have experience, but the one experience I do have is 7 addresses, 17 addresses, 3 addresses. And it's not with NFPA's required 25-man initial attack in a class 1 pumper. It's with whatever we were able to scrape together selling chicken noodle hoagies on a weekend. You know what I mean? We go in there and get some with some guy
oh yeah,
point him in the right direction. Yeah. It won't stop once you get him there, but don't expect him to spell direction or do the report afterwards. You know what I mean? Like,
so how do we take, and now we're going to start diving into it, because you spent some time in the training academy molding the newer generation. So I'm curious, before we get into all the academy stories, how do we take those experiences, right? Like your 1 in 10 alarms being a 17 address working fire. What do you do at that point? What does Bob do taking that one experience and translating it to the world down here where different rules, different battlefield, different people next to you? What's that balance? You can't just come in and say, this is how we did it.
Right.
You also can't dismiss everything that you did because you definitely learned some things along the line. So how do you distill that essence of the experience that you can, like you said, bottle it and then you sprinkle it onto the remaining career?
So I think it's important to have that discussion with your people, learning your people's abilities. Learning your people's abilities, like find out what they're good at, find out what experience they have, and then tie them in and involve them, right? And have this conversation. If you're a cool guy, you don't have to spend a lot of time telling guys that you're cool. If I've got to walk in here and tell you, I went to this fire and I went to that fire, or I mean, like, look at how cooked up my helmet is, because how cooked up my helmet is going to tell you what kind of a firefighter you are. Okay. I have witnessed firsthand people leaning into, a smoke barrel at a training barrel to try to get a little bit of artificial experience, right? or maybe putting their head in front of a window that's venting right now to get a little more cook on that hat.
Dude, don't they know all they have to do is just put it in the oven?
So, but the whole thing comes down to like, well, realistically, exposure to something doesn't necessarily mean you're learning from it, right? You can go to this, but if you don't cognitively dissect it, and I joke with my guys about, listen, Thanksgiving comes once a year. We can't send a turkey to the trash can with meat on the bones. When we run this job, we run this call, especially when it's something weird, significant, we pick it apart. We got to learn as much as we can, warts and all, take it apart, discuss it, and discuss it in a way is real. Talk about what well, talk about what did, talk about why, look at the contributing factors and information associated with it, realizing that these past experiences teach so much, whether they're here or they're somewhere else. That's why I look for these incidents that are occurring with regional relevance. We're looking at, hey, there was a massive natural gas explosion in Colombia. Everything that was present for that, everything is available here. We run these calls. Mm-hmm. But that day, the planets aligned and they blew that place to pieces. Well, and it's one of those situations like, how many fatalities?
0.
Why?
Dude, I mean, the stars aligned. We got lucky. Honestly, like, looking back on
part of it was luck, but
yeah.
What are your operational policies?
Yeah, we isolated the night entry.
And how many natural gas explosions had you run before that day?
None, but that was
pretty significant, yeah. Right? So the first time you've done something that you've never done before, right, was a multi-story commercial structure that basically blew it to pieces.
Yeah.
Right? Cool. Right? Congratulations. Your first time was awesome, right? So then I said to my guys, like, well, how often do we do that? How often do we blow a town to sticks? Not that frequent.
We've done that too.
Yes, you have, as a matter of fact, right? And you're not the only one. When you start looking in the region of what, okay, cool. So when we watch Game 2, right? When I'm on YouTube, and this was hysterical, man, because I come out of the fire academy, find myself in an environment with some individuals that are institutionally inert, right? They're stationary. And the last thing that they want, last thing that they want is anybody that's moto, right? Mm-hmm. You come in fired up, and I get it. I'm not everybody's cup to you. That's fine. But I come in and they don't want to train. I'm going to find a way, whether it's reading a book or watching video. And I would much rather watch a video because I can instantly validate the information. I can apply it. I can dissect it, and I can process. I can build these systems, right? So then I start making these flashcards. There's a psychological concept called recognition prime decision making, right? So we start ripping through all this stuff. Cool. I might have never on a multi-story commercial structure that's been blown to pieces, but I have mentally rehearsed it hundreds of times. So when the first time it occurs, whether it's reviewing this policy, and in reviewing this policy, we pause, look at the policy. What's the policy say? Well, our policy says 150 and 500. Those are our isolation distances. All right, cool. Why? Well, let's look at this video. It blows the roof off this place 30 feet in the air and drops this thing into a pile of flaming, smoldering fun. Oh, wow. Imagine if we'd have parked right in front of them. Yeah. And then we start to look at if they understand the why, and they have a visual context and reference for it, and they understand these parameters. And I could try to appeal to as many of their senses as possible when they experience it the first time, right? Like they've already intellectually rehearsed it. They've heard the noise. They've heard the traffic. They've heard the numbers. They've heard these kind of things. So it's not the first time, might be the first time physically they're experiencing all of these things at much, but I can try to generate a simulation in a low consequence environment where they can rehearse. And if they make a mistake, I can bring them back to success, an environment that will not cause them physical harm, injury. Imagine what happens when you don't do that stuff. You wait for that. You surrender the initiative. Right? You're waiting for experience to teach you. You park in front of this place and it blows it to sticks, and it blows your people to pieces, and it blows your apparatus to pieces. And then you take, now what? Well, right. I've waited for the experience to teach me. I wasn't prepared. And now I'm in the recovery phase. And everything that happens after the fact, why would we surrender the initiative? I refuse to surrender the initiative. I take the initiative. I'm going to find a way, or I'm going to make them. And we're going to research these things proactively, because realistically, so much of what we do now, we do such an effective job with prevention that we are our own worst enemy. The reason we don't run fires is because of America burning. It's because of the actions we took in the 1970s associated with safety, associated with prevention, smoke detectors, residential sprinklers, NFPA codes, inspections. Now what? We don't run as many fires, so we blame the kids. That's not the kids' fault. Mm-hmm. But then when we do, now what? And we start to explore those things. We start to explore changing and adapting hazards. Like, I've got to try to generate for them that experience, because if I wait for them to get it, we're behind the ball.
I'm still stuck in the turkey analogy. I love that. Like, legitimately, it's I feel that way, and many times starting my career, we had those maybe once in a lifetime calls, or those very interesting ones that didn't really talk about them too much. And I think the whole hot wash or the after action has been shrouded in this aura of negativity of, hey, we're just going to nitpick and we're going to tell you what you did wrong. And we lose that initiative, that advantage of having that memory fresh, where we can say, hey, Bob, you did a fantastic job. TJ, why the fuck were you parked in that spot? Why did you do all these things? And, I would rather learn from somebody else's mistakes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
dude, 100%.
I'd rather somebody else spill the blood for me not to have to spill mine, right, or my people, most important.
Especially when they're high consequence, right? Especially when they're high consequence, when it costs the life of the civilians we've sworn to protect, or our brothers and sisters across the United States, career volunteer, anywhere. Right? Like we owe it to everybody.
I mean, that's why we read NIOSH reports. That's why.
Yes.
It's such a hollowed thing, and it's such a lot of people don't like that, because we're talking about death and our own people dying. But that person would probably want you to learn, so you or your people don't end up in that spot.
Well, so that concept right there, like it's not the what, it's the why, right? We read these reports. Why? Well, I'm doing it because I have to. Okay. The real why is to make sure that we don't end up in those reports, to make sure that civilians don't end up in these reports, to make sure that we can learn as much as possible, right? That we owe it to them. We owe it to, and take it to that turkey analogy again, right? We can't send the turkey to the trash can with meat on the bones. That's just wasteful. That's problematic, right? So why? If I'm reading this to understand every single one of these conditions that occurred this day when all the planets aligned. They happen on every single call.
Oh, yeah, maybe they don't align all the way.
Yeah, and that's what happened.
But you're what's the difference?
But we don't learn from those. We don't learn from those close calls, right? You have a close call driving the apparatus, you almost get hammered. I'm a good driver. Like, that was close, and then you just brush it off and keep on rolling, right? So I really enjoyed one leadership course that I got to take. I had the opportunity to take, because they published these reading lists that we had to explore, and it helped me to connect a lot of those dots. So I try to find one of the reasons we talk about learning from our people, right? One of the reasons that I study history, especially World War II, right, is I'm Robert R., right? That's Robert T. Robert F. Robert F. was born in 1909. In 1942, got drafted. The Second World War, right? My dad was born while Granddad was in basic training. Got to come home, meet him for 3 days before shipped out as an infantry replacement in North Africa. Right? Fought through North Africa. Fought through Italy. So, like, just incredible stories of what his organization went through, what his infantry division went through, the battles that he fought in, right? Like, just, there's a reason they don't make a lot of movies about what happened in North Africa and Italy, especially Italy, right? Because we like to create this narrative, like we win the war and everything's great and we're great liberators and stuff. But Italy was really rough. So the reason I share all this is, like, I like history, I like military history, but I also like ice hockey, like sports, I like people, love people, music, right? I was in a band once upon a time. Like, so when I talk to these people, and I got a guy on my team who, new guy on the shift, what are some stuff you're into? Guy's a Marine, that's going to be easy. Guy's in the Army, that's going to be easy. Cool, because I can tie everything back to this military experience. Okay, now, keep in mind, most of my knowledge of military stuff kind of stops right around that Second World War. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the concepts are still present, but I had a dude who was on my shift who was a soccer player. Well, I could talk, right? I could talk about soccer. I love soccer, right? Love sports because it's all about people in a conflict environment. Isn't sport just a conflict environment where it's why we enjoy watching. So if I can transfer these concepts from baseball, football, ice hockey, soccer, even
I mean, we have to do that now. It's our generation. That's a generation showing up.
Yeah. And then we can take these concepts associated with video games and tie them over to what's going on here, right? If we can reach them on their ground, that's the transferable skill. We put such a premium on building trades, right? This dude worked construction. Like, oh man, he's going to be an awesome firefighter. Why?
Right.
What did he do at the construction site? We carried stuff. Like, cool. We do a lot of carrying stuff. You know what I mean? Like, that'll be great. But from that same concept, if he understands the anatomy and physiology of the structure, he understands what it's supposed to do when it's good, and he understands how it's going to perform when it's bad. So same way, if I've got somebody that's coming over from a healthcare field, well, I was a CNA, and they joined the fire department because they thought it'd be interesting. They want to be an EMT, medic. Cool. When we talk about fire stuff, we start with construction because that's anatomy and physiology. Because if you understand the anatomy and physiology of the structure, oh yeah, okay, I can eat that now. And they talk through it, like, why is there scaffolding? Why are there rakers? Well, because their bones are broken. These are the casts on the outside. Lights start coming on. Next thing you know, we can take this. I joke about one of my retirement gigs is going to be, I'm going to write a series of books, right? Firefighting for paramedics and paramedicine for firefighting. They talk about how
sell out. Bro.
Hey, they talk about how different it is. Like, what? What's different about it? Tell me, please.
It's just the language.
Yeah, your pump operator. That guy should be a cardiologist,
right?
Because he gets it. You know what I mean? And
dude, that is one. I'm telling you, like, that is one thing that I admire so much about you is just being able to take these things that we see as so linear and so stiff and strict, almost, right? It's firefighting. It's got to be a blue collar thing. It's got to be. You got to have the tradesmen coming into it, and they're like, well, we can explain it to a nurse, and they'll understand. And I guarantee you that analogy. I know at least one medic who's going to be like, holy shit, that makes so much sense now.
Like, hey, a ladder truck pulls in, parks on your supply line. What's your engine do? Man, like, what happened to your intake pressure? Cool. Now what happens to your discharge pressure? Or what's your
pump operator showing up with a hatchet?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. It's like, this is what's going on here. So we talk about, take these concepts that we already understand and add a different context to them. The reason, uniting it, bringing it together, right? I was just sharing this with a buddy of mine right now who's heavily involved in training. He's a football guy, right? He's a football coach for junior, with the football stuff to be fluent, like Pee Wee. These are young kids, right? These are young kids, and he's a football coach for them. Does a great job. I hit him with this the other day. So I was talking about Eisenhower, right? Eisenhower had no combat experience. You know what he did have experience in between the wars in the 1930s? Football coach.
Oh,
Eisenhower took the concepts from being a football coach and applied them to his generalship and his staff. He took them, he put them, you were all on the same team. We eat like a team. We play like a team. We talk about the game. We review. So the reason we won the Second World War was because a general with no combat experience took concepts from outside of a military environment and applied them successfully. Eisenhower worked for him. Well, let's see if it works for me.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's huge, dude. Taking those concepts and transcending that plane, right? It's the next thing that I want to talk about, because I'm sure you did that when you did your stint at the training academy.
Oh,
because I've seen a couple of the people that came out from your classes, and not to inflate your ego, but they're all right.
they're my people, man.
Yeah.
They're all my people. Everybody that wears this uniform, whether you work on your department, my department, wherever, right? Like if you're a firefighter, I love you, right? And I'm super proud of my organization, and I'm proud of my people. I love my guys. They're always going to be my guys, my recruits, right? It's one of these things where when I have the opportunity to see them, I'm so proud. When I see one of them on a medic unit or on an engine, making a difference, it's a way that I'll be able to play forever. Yeah. You have to forgive me. My passion runs deep.
Dude, it shows. I mean, one of your guys ended up coming to us, and love the guy. He's solid. He's good.
Love that kid. He's a good kid.
I miss working with him. Every now and then I see him, and I'm like, I miss Sean so much.
He's a good kid. I love that guy. One of those things like, sad to see him go. Love him, proud of him. Happy to see what he's doing down there, and just I couldn't when I found out where he was going and who he was going to be with, man, like how perfect was that to know like how small the world is, you know what I mean, and how great it is, like and even then, I mean, like I get to play forever, everywhere, right? Like, so I love being able to see that. I love being able to see people go out and serve the mission, man. That's exciting, makes me proud. I can't take total responsibility for it, right? There's so much that they brought of who they were, before they even started the academy, and they moved through the academy, and then who they become. And, like that's not all, you know what I mean? Like there's so many gifted instructors they have experience with, and then the finishing the field people give, and then the effort that those individuals, you know what I mean? In everyday life and activity to make them the best that they can be. But I'm just excited about part of it.
Yeah, and you guys do a fantastic job. I keep up with your academy, and Chief Malta, he posts a lot, and he gets that stuff out there, and it's interesting to watch. It's so cool that whoever thought you'd be excited to be saying, like, it gets me excited to watch other people go through an academy, but it's just kind of cool because you've been there, that struggle, what they're going through, and that at the end, it's going to be such a sweet reward,
right? And
such a proud accomplishment when they get through all those months, when they achieve all their good test scores, when recruit class 33 gets their guidon back. Like, it's all those good things that eventually will happen.
Yeah. So, like that kind of thing. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people out there. Once again, the same haters, right? Who. The warrior poet Taylor Swift said, are gonna hate, the same guys that hate about YouTube firefighters or whatever, like, don't realize, like, listen, I can only imagine 100 years ago, there was somebody be like, oh man, these telephone firefighters these days that use the telephone or these firefighters that use motorized fire apparatus, or these firefighters that are wearing breathing apparatus. Like, okay, this is a new and emerging technology and we're adopting it, right? The kids these days, this is how they communicate, right? They're not looking for a billboard. They're not picking up the newspaper and digging through the classified ads. They get an 8-second nugget of something that's cross-linked from a buddy shared to them on their, Faceagram or whatever. And, oh, cool. Well, if that's how they speak, we need to speak their language too. Right? We can't just stand in the corner and be angry that nobody's dancing with us. We got to reach out to them. I think it's incredible what Chief Malta is doing. Because essentially of his own initiative, he has reached out and utilized this platform. We'll call it zero expense to the organization, and has made something now that gets nationwide recognition. You know what I mean? That increases our recruiting pool. That increases our, that's just amazing. You know what I mean? That's absolutely amazing for us.
Yeah. And I mean, I love doing this stuff. I'm big into marketing. I live in those social media accounts, and it took me a while to realize what you just said, that we have to go where our future is, where our people are right now, but where our future lies. Everybody bemoans TikTok and Instagram and now our boomer generation is sitting on Facebook arguing about dumb stuff.
Right.
But yeah, they're on TikTok. You know what that means? You have a captive audience.
Yeah.
If you leverage it the right way, and I'm not saying go dance in front of a fire engine, do any of that stuff.
Right.
I've been posting blurbs from interviews, from different recordings, superimposed on cool videos of fires, of extrications, things like that, and throwing them out there on TikTok. And I'm talking a reach of 200,000 plus people.
Right.
So that is 200,000 people who may or may not have heard that message before, but now they do.
Right.
Now they understand.
Like, let's shoot a commercial and put it on local government public access television.
Right.
You're not going to reach it.
Yeah, who are you going to get?
Right. Like, let's make an advertisement and let's put it at the movie theaters. Get people, right? Like, what do they use? It's the internet every day. You're using social media every day. They've got their pocket device ready to roll. They've got the app installed. Stop, buying billboards on the side of the highway. That will reach some people, but that won't reach your target audience. Your target audience are the young, motivated people who have never even considered a career in fire rescue, right? They're not a 7th generation legacy firefighter, right? They're looking for something meaningful. And if a 10-second video gives them access to that, gives them insight. Like I said, I was 25 in a television show that hadn't been on the air for almost 40 years, right? Piqued my interest. And I was like, I'd never really thought about this before. And then once you see it in action, like we were out to dinner one night, they put out a box, downtown borough of Lewistown. Right?
Borough.
So by the time we get there, everything's done. Supply lines are down, attack lines are out, aerial devices up, ladders. Everybody's doing what they're supposed to. And I'm thinking to myself, this looks like a football play. You know what I mean? Like somebody else, they yell the magic word. Everybody does their job. They do it meticulously. And I think this is kind of cool. It's kind of cool to see it all come together. And I realized there are so many different components of it that require those energies. To carry over to the sports. Who's the most valuable player on a team? Well, the individual effort is nowhere near as important as the sum total, right? We look at this because I joke with guys when I try to use the football stuff. Who scores the most points on football? The kicker, right? But so you start to think about that. Is he more valuable than a linebacker who scores no points? And then you start to look at, well, without this guy, you can't do that job. If everybody's a kicker, your team's not going to perform well, right? So these individuals who do choose these specific endeavors, we have to encourage them, appreciate them for the job they do. Don't chastise them for the job they don't. Realize that everybody in our organization is required to be a generalist. I love the Marine Corps concept. Every Marine's a rifleman. Like I say in my firehouse, every firefighter is an EMS provider. Every EMS provider is a firefighter, because the reality is that's a job.
But then within, you have those specialists, right? Yeah. You know the guy that you can go to for trench rescue. You know the guy that you're going to put on a rope, And I think that's one of the things that drew me so much to special operations from the get-go, is that almost fairy tale idea of when you look at special forces teams, when you look at Green Berets, Navy SEALs, all that stuff. Yes, every person is a warrior. Every person can, to an extent, do somebody else's job. I talked about it in one of the mantras, like your medic is still going to be laying down fire. Right? He's still going to be taking out bad guys. And your machine gunner is still going to know how to treat wounds and is still going to know how to set up communications. But then when you get them in their element, that's when they can shine. And that's something that I think it's so important within the fire service, within special operations in the fire service, is that we all have to do, obviously, our job and understand each other's job. But then being able to pick your individuals.
Yeah.
And basically you take that lever for performance, and you just crank on it. You put the right people in the right spots and you crank that lever, and you're going to get an amazing team.
Right. And you give them that opportunity. You give them that space to, the freedom of maneuverability, define your intent and let them go. Because so many of those people, like everybody, generalists, like I feel like some of my talents lie in the fact that I'm pretty good at a lot of stuff. I'm not incredible. I'm a pretty artist. I'm not the best artist out there. I'm a pretty, I'm not like I'm just this jack of all trades, master of none. But butcher the rest of the saying, right? It's way more gooder than a master of one, right? Jack of all trades, master of none. But it's better than being a master of one.
Yeah.
Because if all it is this single incident, cool, it's my time to shine. What about the 250 other call types for goal?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So how do you promote that within your firehouse, on your shift? How do you recognize people's talents and put them in the right spots to basically get the most return for your investment?
Yeah, so I feel like that's a great question. I think a lot of that has to do with learning who they are, learning what they're good at, learning what they like, learning what they don't, and helping them to get better. Like I get that guy who's the medical specialist, who's the high-speed medical background, really gets into medical stuff associated with, like, cool, have as much maneuverability on the medical, guide us through policies. I'm going to let him debrief, medical and trauma incidents that we respond to. I'm going to encourage my other guys to discuss it as well, right? To seek him out, because now this person sees value in what they're doing. We don't decriminalize. I worked at a couple of firehouses with a couple of supervisors who one of their rules was no EMS at the table, right? Well, this is a major component of our job, right? If we discuss the value, the psychological value of reconciling after the fact, like going through debriefing, learning these lessons, understanding like, hey, did you know what you just saw? What you just saw was this thing, this super rare, super special thing that you might only see a handful of times in your career, and it's potentially deadly for him. And be aware of these kind of things, that kind of stuff. We're not allowed to talk about it. Who does that benefit? It's not the patient.
Definitely
it's not the providers. It's the insecure dude at the end of the table who doesn't like talking about something that makes him uncomfortable. Realizing everybody's got some things. Like, I am not perfect at everything. I'm sincerely flawed in so many stuff. When I make that mistake, own it. Take the teeth out of it, talk about it, show everybody, show that sports analog. Like, look at this Super Bowl victory. Were there fumbles? Were there interceptions? Were there lost yard plays? Absolutely. Did they still win? Yes. So outcome is one thing. Processes, we got to work so hard on that process, try to improve that process. Because in a lot of ways, I can't control the outcome. Right? We get called for that house fire. Dude, that story might have been over before we even get out that door. Floor to ceiling, wall to wall, front to back, this place is jumping, and we're not going to stop it.
Yeah, a quick interjection that fits in well is I remember there was a book that Jake Tapper wrote about, I think it was called The Outpost, about fire-based cop Keating, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they got pummeled. But one of the chapters, it will always stick with me. It says, the enemy gets a vote.
Oh, yeah.
And it talked about a day where everything was going right, and then a couple well-placed shots by the enemy it was just wreaking havoc on the whole day. And going back to what you were saying, the outcome is not guaranteed. Your process might be amazing, but the fire gets a vote.
And for me, that's something that gets so. When I draw those parallels to sports and military, acknowledge that like it's not a direct line, right? They're very similar, but they're not the same. You consider they planned for years for June 6th of 1944. How many years of planning went into that? And how many operations were planned and then canceled and then adjusted and realigned and then training and then, these lessons are applied. And then they planned for years for one day, and they knew exactly what day that they hoped. And then they had to change it because of weather. Had to change it because of weather, right? Had to change it because of conditions. And then even then, did everything go perfect? Absolutely not. They had units landing on the wrong beach. They had stuff to. But the point I'm trying to make is, do we get to choose when? Do we get to choose where? Do we get to choose what people we put on? Like we don't. It's not like before the NFL season starts, they know when they're playing the Super Bowl and where. They just don't know what teams are going to make it there. They play the whole season. That's great. But even after their season's over and the playoffs are done, they still get this gap where they can go through, adjust their players and their rosters. How's this, running back match up against their defense? We don't have that opportunity. Our Super Bowl call could be right now with no preparation, with the team that you got, and half your hoses off, and your frontline engine's out of service. Same kind of thing. At 2 a.m., imagine being woken up quiz. But now you failed your math quiz. How'd that feel? It's cool. I'm going to wake you up at 2 a.m., give you a math quiz, and this guy's life or death is going to matter. You knew that those were the conditions that you truly were going to operate in. How much energy would you preparation? If you knew tomorrow, 12 hours, 5 hours, 1 hour, 16 minutes, 15 minutes, would you add extra workout? Would you take that nap? Would you get that snack? Would you check on your partner? Would you make that phone call? I mean, would you study those streets? Would you study that neighborhood? Would you learn about other, if you knew you were going to detonate this building in the middle of Columbia, would you have maybe read up on it the week before, you know what I mean? Or the shift before or whatever?
I think I got lucky because that used to house my favorite bar. So I'm like, I know exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I walked up and I tripped the burglar alarm because I wanted to make sure my favorite bar was intact.
Right. Well, then, to that, there's your transferable skill, right? So we talk about that, right? All right. Some of the hardest guys are the people that don't have like a team-based environment. Got this person. What did you work? Oh, well, I was a server for this fancy restaurant. All right. Well, how do I tie that to the fire rescue? I can tie that to fire rescue. If you've ever worked in any kind of like restaurant or know what that stuff's like they're a very close-knit team. Mm-hmm. And everybody's got their job. So we can start breaking down about specificity, that kind of stuff. Well, now this person who worked downtown knows and understands concepts like population variance, right? Occupancy variance. All right, cool. What's that restaurant going to be like at 0100? What's it going to be like at 03? What's it going to be like at Friday night at 2100? Mm-hmm. Right. Now you run this medical call. What are some things you're thinking of? Like, what do you guys keep in the basement? Well, now they're sharing all kinds of stuff. Well, this dude doesn't, this guy over here was in the Marine Corps. He knows put the pointy end in the bad guy. Right. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't know anything about like, oh yeah, well, we store all this stock and inventory downstairs and the kitchen's usually located back. And this, so I hear you saying like, hey, this place that you spend time in, you like it. Imagine now it's blown to pieces. You know where stuff should be because you've spent time in that. Like,
yes.
One of the things that I like about living in the community that I work is every day, everything that I'm doing, that's all pre. Mm-hmm. Well, the drawbacks that I hadn't considered because once again, when I was trying to get on the job and I was like, residency requirements are stupid. You know what I mean? Because I wanted to work in a fire department. I didn't care where. And I couldn't even apply for these places because I didn't live there. But the benefit about living where you work is I'm a stakeholder. I'm invested, right? My kids go to school here. My house is here. I care very deeply about the job that my people do because they could be coming for me. They could be coming for my wife, my children, first my friends. I care very deeply about the job I do. But I'm always at work in one way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? And it's hard to turn stuff off. It's hard to get that separation, to understand, like, hey, we're going for ice cream. We're going to this restaurant downtown. This restaurant downtown, I'm familiar with because I've been there on an incident. You know what I mean? Maybe it's not good, Or I drive past this intersection and I always remember this intersection because I remember what happened. I remember what I did there.
So how do you balance that?
Oh, I wish there was like an easy way to say like, oh, I just take a big nap. It's like,
I mean, I'll tell you on my end.
Sure.
I love driving away from work because I'm heading down 70. All the problems start melting away.
Right.
Everything that happened. I'm like, you know what? I get 2 days off. Yeah.
So I think that's interesting because I've heard a lot of my friends that are non-residents talk about that debrief time. Essentially, they're leaving work and they have this acclimation time to occur before they have to go home and be dad or husband, boyfriend, wife, mother, girlfriend, whatever. They have this time to themselves to kind of put it behind, reconcile from about 1.5 miles from my firehouse. So I get less than 10 minutes. But it's finding those ways. I wish I could say that I wish I could say that I came to a lot of those things proactive. Didn't know. I had some struggles after some incidents, and it got to a point where it was really causing issues at home, and I got help, and that gave me a lot of context and guided a lot of what I did to try and identify those things about myself and what's going on, and maybe be more transparent about how things affect. And, my opinion of who I am is that tied up in people that I care the most about. They know who I am. So when I can share with those people, I recently told my guys, told my people on my shift, like, hey, I know something's going on. I'm working a lot. I got a lot of stuff going on. I have this alignment of all these different things right now, and I can tell that I'm not 100% right now. I want you guys to know that I'm aware of it. I want you to know, right? And demonstrate that kind of vulnerability with your people, right? Because that's where that strength's going to come from, If you only ever work on the stuff you're at, you're only going to get that stuff. You see those guys that stomp around the gym. They're jacked up from the waist up, walking on chicken legs, right? Like, you don't have to argue with these guys to do bench. You're like, oh, bench, shoulders, biceps, triceps, right? Cool. Like, about legs. For me, like, core work. I can't get stoked to lay on my back and put my feet in the air. Like, I just can't do it. Guess what? Got to make it my favorite. You know what I mean? Yeah. We're doing flutter kicks. We're doing V sit-ups. We're doing, you know what I mean? Like, hello, dollies. Core work. Why? Because I know I don't like it. I've got to make it my favorite. I've got to work on it because I know it's a weakness, and I take that weakness and make it into a strength. It makes me more versatile, more resilient, in that way.
Solid as always. I mean, we're coming up to the end now. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Is there anything else you want to touch on?
I think something that's important to share is the genesis of some of my processes for how I prepare. In Frederick here, we have our medics are chase cars. Right? It's a SUV and it's just single provider. So you're by yourself. A lot of autonomy, a lot of independence. That's also bad because there's times when you go out and run stuff and you could run the worst call of your career and everybody in your firehouse, your social support system, no idea what you just did. You go out at 0200 to run something awful and you come back, nobody knows. And you get to sit and marinate it all by yourself, right? So once upon a time, a doctor, her name is Karen Pheasant. She's up in Pennsylvania now, say a Mountain Medical Center at State College. She gave a bunch of us copies of a book called On Combat by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. And as I'm reading this book, lights start coming on for me because I'm like realizing how what I learned is applied, how I process stuff, how I prepare, that guiding everything from a training aspect to this position of unconscious competence, right? The reason why, like we do stuff, but we don't look at the why. So in the fire academy, we do gear drills, but we don't spend a lot of time describing why. We just know we do. Why? Well, it's so that 0200, when your head's full of pudding, you put all your stuff on quickly the right way. Now, I'll challenge you with what happens when you want a skill change. Right? You go from zipper on your turnout gear to hook and D's, right? One little variance, and suddenly it upsets the apple cart, right? You hop in a rental car and you don't know how to turn the turn signals on. You know what I mean? Or you don't know where the parking brake is, right? Because it's not your vehicle. You haven't rehearsed it. You're not unconsciously competent. When I was working to be released as an engine driver, officer was just running us through drills, like attack scenarios, right? Where you pull in with the engine, hydrant, you're flowing an attack line, and the hydrant is some ungodly distance away, and you got to hustle back and forth. And we run a 3-person engine in Frederick currently. We're moving towards 4-person staffing. There's no leave somebody at the hydrant. We don't do that. And we are the largest geographic Landmass County in Maryland. So depending on where you are, your second company might be 30 seconds behind you, or they might be 5, 7, 10 minutes behind, right? So we'd run this scenario, stretch a line, flow water and secure your own water supply, right? And then we add, take you to success. Like, oh, cool, you got this right. Now we're further away. Now you're pointing the wrong direction. Like the hydrant's not behind you, or it's a straight pull off the back of the wagon. It's in front of you. You know what I mean? Or get there and the hydrant's got some problem, right? Troubleshoot it, right? Cool. So we're adding all these index cards. We're adding all these flashcards to your brain. So at 200, when your head's full of pudding, you've got this reference. You've rehearsed it before. You've done it before. You're just executing. So I don't like to throw out a lot of war stories, but once upon a time, no shit, there I was, right? Working in Urbana. And at the time, our staffing in Urbana, just to give you an idea how we've changed in Frederick, at the time, our staffing in Urbana, we had 3 firefighters 24/7 and a firefighter medic on a medic unit chase car by themselves. And the 3 people, right, as an officer, 2 firefighters, typically a technician, but my technician was off that day, so I had the honor, I was driving the engine. So myself and the other firefighter would cross-staff an ambulance. So if we got hit for engine and ambulance, like engine driver only, ambulance with 2, right? So we get hit for this outside fire. Middle of the night, outside fire, over in the villages of Urbana. Right? So know exactly where it's at. Why? Because we do street drills, we do the rehearsals. Find ways for some people I grew up as a landmark kid. Like, oh, you drive down here to the Twin Kiss, you turn left, go up to the 7-Eleven, turn right, down to, you see Snapshots, Quick Flicks, you're going to go turn in there. Jim's house is the one with the red shutters. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know the address. I don't know the numbers, but I've got the landmarks.
You know how to get there.
Yeah. So realize, like, all right, some guys are huge on the turn by turn. Some guys are huge on the maps. Some guys are huge on the visual, finding those ways, but we do map drills more. Right, it's mental rehearsal. Discuss these things. We talk about those things. So, bam, we get it with the address. I know where it's at. I know what the hydrant plan's like, the water supply plan in that neighborhood. We're going to this thing. These are the days before MDTs, right? So all we have is a printout. I'd saved the printout somewhere. It says mattress on fire. So outside fire, mattress on fire. Now, my officer had previously experienced a multi-alarm fire in Urbana where he was on the engine. The ambulance crew was out, so he was at the firehouse by himself, and they got hit for this call. Right, he goes with this other dude that he doesn't know very well, driving him. They get there, and it ended up being, a row of townhomes, 1, 2 alarms. Right, fire started outside, went down the row. Right? In sprinklered residences, fire punches through, disables the sprinklers, burns this row of townhomes. Right, and so I know he's got, like, in the back of his mind, we're headed to this place. We're rolling into the neighborhood. It's probably about 3 blocks from where he went 2 alarms on a row, right? So we're headed in. As we're coming in, we got a guy doing jumping jacks on the street, and you can see it above the roof of the house. I'm like, okay. And as we pull in and pop the brake, his first words getting out of the wagon, I'll never forget it, were, is it on the deck or is it in the yard? Right. And the guy didn't speak English very well. He says, it's on the deck. Right. And he yelled at the firefighter in the back, bring a line. So through the gap of townhomes and around the back. And when we come around the back, this place is jumping. Right. The address is off into 2 exposures. Right. And it's us, 3 guys on 1 engine. And it's not middle of the afternoon. Like we weren't, you know what I mean? This is the middle of the night. It woke us up. Right. Woke us up in the middle of the night. I'm flushing the hydrant when I realize I'm autopilot.
Yeah.
Like lines off, lines charged, water's flowing. You know what I mean? Like I'm flushing a hydrant. I'm hooking up the hydrant. I'm calling out where my water supply is at, running back up the street. First ladder, second ladder. You know what I mean? The officer, I got 1 firefighter, single guy on the back, working the fire from the outside. Officer comes to the front, takes a second line. He's going in the front door when a guy's crawling out on his hands and knees from the front of this place, right? And the 3 of us worked this fire before, you know what I mean? Like the rest of because we filled the box out. Keep in mind, like, largest geographic, our next 2 companies.
It takes time.
Yeah. So, but we worked this joker, and the whole time, like I said, I'm flushing this hydrant when I realized, like snap out of it. Like, I've been on autopilot this whole time. We've spent so much time in preparation. I'm not the busiest company in Frederick. We We weren't running, 2,000 calls a year, but we spent so much time in preparation. When the time came, that was the fruits of our labor. Like, we did such a job that I could be proud of, that I could realize, like, hey, this is why we prepare the way we do. It's like, look, we might not run 100 of these, we might not run 1,000, but when the time comes, if we run one, using the excuse, there's no excuse. Like, hey, we're not busy. What do you mean busy? Like, you can make yourself busy. We can prepare. We can spend all our time in preparation. And that doesn't mean that I need to be shaking guys out of the rack, at 2,300, be like, hey, it's a pop quiz, we got to go do, it's realizing, hey, all of this preparation can be incremental, but it can be training with a purpose, training with a goal set, and then taking those concepts and correlating it over to the recruits, enforcing this idea in the fire academy. Like, look, you will be a leader one day. Just start thinking about these, because you're going to get out in the field. Next thing you know, 6 months of probation, there's another recruit coming behind. And then you've got to be a leader for him. And then there's other people that are coming in. So everybody's a leader, everybody's a follower, and carrying that through everything you do, every piece of preparation, whether it's physical training. Never been in a house fire, but man, I wish I could do more push-ups. But in physically conditioning yourself to operate fire. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. Makes sense.
No, you're not babbling. I'm going back to the whole being on autopilot, because I think we've all been on those calls that, if you're lucky, it happens halfway through, or you come back to the station, you're like, what did I just do?
Right.
Oh, I think it went fine, but you just kind of go. Which I think it's kind of horrifying when you think of it, but it speaks volumes to the training that you were able to just go.
Right.
Just do stuff and not even think about it.
Well, so one of my dad's sayings was always like, you can tell how good a football team is by how they recover after the fumble. Right? Like, it's not about what happens when everything goes right. It's when something goes wrong, because something will go wrong.
Always.
Then what do you do? How do you recover from that? Well, those people that have trained to the point where they are unconsciously competent, they are so good at what they think about. Now they've got that space to adapt and recover, and you know what I mean? Like, but somebody who hasn't prepared, their stress levels are already through the roof, because now they're being confronted with the fact that they're not ready. It's pop quiz time and I didn't study. Oh my God, what do I do? Realizing, like, effort that I can put on the front end and the dividends it pays in the back end. You know what I mean? That I don't want to be sitting there on game day wishing I'd done more.
What's up, everybody? I hope you enjoyed that episode with Bob. He is an awesome human being, so full of knowledge, so full of experience, and I'm definitely going to have him back again, because I really want to keep picking his brain. As always, as we always do at the end of the podcast, we're going to give a shout out to our Patreon subscribers, because these are the guys and gals who keep our community going and who help us achieve incredible things like the Firefighter Fund that we talked about at the beginning. And we're going to switch things up a little bit. I used to do the first name and the first initial of the last name. I'm just going to do the first name and their city and state, because it's so exciting to see where everybody's coming from, where everybody's subscribing, and it just puts in perspective how big of a community we have. So without further ado, awesome shout out, special thanks go out to Ethan from Eastover, North Carolina, Megan from Fort Washington, Maryland, Hunter from Johnson City, Illinois, Zach from Sacramento, California. I got a lot of friends down in Sacramento. Sydney from Castle Pines, Colorado. Emily from Fort Irwin, California. Becca, also from California in Long Beach. Cole from Colleyville, Texas. Hunter, also in Texas, this time in Austin. And my buddy Bryson in Mobile, Alabama. Guys and gals, thank you so much, not just for listening, but also for subscribing to the podcast and for continuing to support the Patreon community. We have awesome things in store. Keep an eye out for the online store coming up soon, and we'll catch you next week. Hey everyone, it's TJ here from Keep the Promise. As you know, this podcast is all about helping firefighters become more resilient and well-rounded. so that they can be a force for good within their fire department and their community. But today, I want to talk to you about something that's just as important, and that is supporting firefighters who are going through tough times. When one of our fellow firefighters is off work because they have to go to the Center for Excellence, they have to go to rehab, they have mental health issues, or they have other health issues, it really takes away their support system and it wreaks havoc on their finances and their family's finances. And many times, these brothers and sisters are left to struggle alone, away from their support system and the people who love them without the resources they need to recover. That's why I'm setting a bold new goal. That is to reach 150 total patrons on Patreon so that we can start a fund to help firefighters and their families during these challenging times. And I need your help to make it happen. With your support on Patreon, we'll be able to provide financial assistance to firefighter families who are battling things like addiction, depression, and cancer. We're going to help alleviate the financial strain that can come with being away from the fire department so that our brothers and sisters can focus on healing and recovering. Now, reaching 150 total patrons is a big goal, but I believe that we can do it together. And when we do, we'll be able to make a real difference in the lives of those who serve and protect alongside us. So, if you're not already a patron, I invite you to join us today. Head over to joinkeepthepromise.com and sign up today. Again, that is joinkeepthepromise.com. And if you already are a patron, thank you so much for your support. You'll be receiving some exclusive rewards and perks as a way of saying thanks. Together, let's show our fellow firefighters that we've got their back just like they always have ours. Thank you for listening. Let's get started with the episode.